GoForThe2.com in with the Week 8 college football predictions. Week number 7 did not disappoint. 3 marquee games went right down to the finish. Double overtime in terms of Oklahoma State and TCU. We saw Tennessee knock off Alabama as a 7.5-point underdog. And then the game at night, Utah goes for 2 and gets the victory and the win over Caleb Williams and USC. An unbelievable slate of action. Really sets the stage for week number 8 and beyond. It's just getting started. We're at the midpoint of college football, and we're just kicking it up a notch for the end of the regular season. We'll see how it plays out. Going to be about 7 picks on the video, a little bit quicker of a breakdown if you want all the instant analysis of all the games this week. Top 25 under the radar games. Tune into Carver and Lisi every night, 10 p.m. to midnight, Sirius Channel 159, Sports Grid Radio. And then Saturday mornings, College Football Today, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern. We get you kicked off and ready with top 25 battles, prop bets, under the radar games, you name it, we have you covered. That's sportsgridradio.com, Sirius Channel 159, and then the video portion on sportsgrid.com if you want to tune in at 9 a.m. Eastern. Let's jump right in to the games this weekend. We'll start in the Pac-12, 3 games on tap. The big one in Eugene between Oregon and UCLA. Oregon has won 3 straight in the series by an average margin of victory of 9 points per game. Got this win last year, 34-31 in the Rose Bowl. Went right down to the wire. Garbers, the backup, did throw a pick when DTR was on the sidelines. That cost UCLA the cover and the win in that ball game. But when you look at Oregon right now, what can you say? Both teams coming out of a bye. They're 5-1. They've regrouped since that week 1 loss to the Georgia Bulldogs, playing very well from an offense and defensive perspective, rushing for around 240 yards on the ground, throwing right in the area of about 260 yards through the air with their quarterback, Bo Nix. He stepped up, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on the year. And on the flip side, you have a balanced offense with UCLA. DTR playing lights out, 15 touchdowns, 2 INTs. Zach Charbonnet running the football. They're averaging around 220 yards on the ground, throwing it right in the area of about 275 heading into this ball game. It comes down to the defenses. Which D-front are you buying into more? You look at Oregon, they're top in terms of top 25 rush defense, giving up 98 rushing yards per game. You have UCLA giving up 99 rushing yards per game. UCLA secondary a tad bit better, giving up only about 250 to opposing quarterbacks through the air. On the flip side, you have Oregon giving up right in the area of about 275 to opposing quarterbacks, and that's where I think DTR does have the advantage. They're catching 6 points in this matchup. I like the balance of UCLA. I like the experience of DTR heading in this ballgame, and I don't like Oregon's third down defense. They're allowing opposing offenses to convert 50% of their third down opportunities, and UCLA has one of the best third down offenses in all of the country, converting 54% of their third down attempts. I think they win this ball game outright, catching the 6 points on the road. I think they strike the upset over Bo Nix and Dan Lanning. Also give the coaching advantage to Chip Kelly, coming off a week of preparation over Dan Lanning, a first-year head coach. I think that'll factor into this ball game. Let's keep it in the Pac-12. Late night, we have Washington going on the road to face Cal. Cal got absolutely abused and allowed Colorado to pick up their first win in the regular season. They get the win in overtime as a 15.5-point underdog. You look at the offense right now for Cal, pathetic. They're only converting around 35% of their third down opportunities. They're only pounding the rock for around 123 yards on the ground against opposing defenses, and they're going up against one of the most prolific offenses in terms of Michael Penix in Washington, coming off a loss 2 weeks ago to Arizona State. I think Washington's prepped. They're ready. They're averaging 380 passing yards per game. They're very opportunistic and converting 55% of their third down attempts as an offense. I think they move the football, strike fast, and force Cal playing at home to match them score for score. I don't think they could do it. I think Washington covers this number fairly easy Saturday night in Berkeley. I think they win this ball game anywhere from 14 to 17 points. Another matchup in the Pac-12 is Stanford laying 3 at home against Arizona State. Arizona State won this ball game last year 28-10. Stanford did pick up the win over Notre Dame as a 16.5-point underdog. Tanner McKee and the crew stepped up and won on the road in South Bend 16-14. They now come back home and face a team in Arizona State that does have a bye week. They have an extra week of preparation, and I think that will benefit this offense. Emory Jones will get the start over the freshman Bourgeau that did lead the win over Washington. I think that's a benefit to have both quarterbacks ready. And Emory Jones is the more experienced group, but this comes down to Stanford. Are you looking at last week as being where Stanford is, or was that the outlier of this team? Because right now, that offense is still not running the football consistently. They're only averaging around 3 yards per carry. They only average or rush for 91 yards on Notre Dame's front seven. Back-to-back games, Stanford has only pounded the rock for 91 and 99 yards in back-to-back games. I don't know if they can run and stay in manageable third down situations against a very athletic defensive front in Arizona State. Here's the other fact as well. The front seven of Stanford giving up a ton of yards on the ground. They're giving up basically 197 rushing yards to opposing offenses. That is the strength still right now of the Arizona State offense. They're averaging well over 4.5 yards per carry. I think they stay in manageable third downs. I think they're able to run the football on Stanford's front seven, and I think they win this ball game, catching 3 points on the road in Palo Alto, calling for the upset, Arizona State over Stanford in that ball game. Another big battle takes place in the SEC. We have LSU and Ole Miss. LSU did open as a 1.5-point underdog. Now they're a 1.5-point favorite. You look at this ball game last year, Ole Miss did pick up this win last year, 31-17. They were laying about 9.5 in that ball game. They started fast and never looked back, rolling in the second half and just keeping LSU at a double-digit lead for much of the second half of that matchup. Here's the factor, though. You look at LSU at home in Baton Rouge. They have won the last 6 meetings over Ole Miss. I think that's a factor that you have to keep in mind. I also like the fact that Jaden Daniels, even though 2 weeks ago he got the loss against Tennessee, you started to see the passing attack come into form. He threw for over 300 against Tennessee in the second half. That carried through last week on the road in the Swamp. He did hit Kayshon Boutte and Jeray Jenkins on long touchdown passes, so I think that'll factor into this matchup going up against Jackson Dart. Keep in mind as well, Lane Kiffin, outside of this year, where he's 2-0 on the road or on a neutral field, is basically 500 the last 2 years in terms of a 6-5 road record. And when you look at right now, Ole Miss, the 2 teams that they have played on the road, Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, are not really true road environments like he's going to see in terms of Jackson Dart in Baton Rouge at 3:30. I like the physicality of LSU's offense. They're averaging 172 yards on the ground. Still believe in that secondary matching up against the Ole Miss wide receivers. And even though Ole Miss is pounding the rock for 270 yards on the ground and picked up 448 against Auburn, I think the defense of LSU could put them into long third downs. I think they could get some pressure on Jackson Dart. And right now, you look at his statistics, 10 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's going to need more than just a rushing attack to beat LSU on the road. I think LSU covers this number. Laying 1.5, I think they win it anywhere from 7 to 10 points in this ballgame. 2 Big Ten battles. We have Minnesota taking on Penn State. Minnesota got absolutely boat raced by Illinois. And the biggest thing in terms of that loss was entering that battle, not only was P.J. Fleck in Minnesota 13-4 on the road or on a neutral field the last 3 seasons, but more importantly, they had the number 1 ranked statistical third down offense and defense in all of the country. They were converting 77% heading into that ball game against Illinois, and more importantly, holding opposing offenses to 17% of their third down attempts. And guess what? They only converted 2 of 7 third downs and allowed Illinois to convert 35% of their third down attempts of 6 of 17. It's back-to-back road games. We know Tanner Morgan's hurt, but they could be facing a beaten-down defense in terms of Penn State that allowed 418 rushing yards to the Michigan Wolverines. Mo Ibrahim still picked up yards last week against a very solid front seven in Illinois. There's the potential look ahead with Penn State looking ahead the following week, October 29th, to Ohio State. And even though their quarterback might not play, I still like the secondary of Minnesota, giving up 159 passing yards to opposing offenses. I think last week was the outlier. I know they didn't play well, but going up against Penn State, I think they're prepped, they're ready, and I think they cover the 4.5, 5-point number against the Penn State and Nittany Lions. I don't know if they win, but I think they definitely are well within the number, and wouldn't be shocked if they pick up the outright win over Penn State. Their season's over, in my opinion, after they got the loss to Michigan last week. They got abused in every facet in the second half, did not look motivated, and it's the same old for James Franklin and Penn State. We'll see how it plays out. I like Minnesota plus the points this coming Saturday at 7:30 primetime game in Happy Valley. Other Big Ten battle takes place in the Horseshoe. We have Ohio State taking on Iowa. Huge number in terms of 28.5. Again, a potential look ahead. We know Ohio State's the most prolific offense in the conference, has the best quarterback, Heisman Trophy frontrunner C.J. Stroud. But you give Kirk Ferentz an extra week of preparation, at least from a defensive perspective. I have to believe that Iowa will force Ohio State into an ugly, methodical, low-scoring game. I'm not suggesting Iowa wins, but catching 4 touchdowns, I think they can run the football. I know they're only averaging 82 rushing yards entering this ball game, but again, we saw this situation play out with Texas A&M a couple of weeks ago facing Alabama. The week before, they got abused by Miss State. Somehow, some way, they found a way to cover the 24.5-point number. I think it's the same thing for Iowa. They lost a couple of weeks ago to Illinois. It was the first time they were underdogs in the series. They snapped an 8-game win streak, and Illinois did, in terms of losing. They lost 8 straight before they knocked off Iowa. I think it's the same thing for Iowa. This is their Super Bowl. It's Ohio State. And the last time they did play was back in 2017 when Iowa abused them 55-24. I'm going to take the 28 points and think that Iowa covers this number this coming weekend. There's the picks for week number 8. I'll go through them right now. You got UCLA, Washington, and Arizona State in the Pac-12. In terms of the SEC, you have LSU, and I'll throw one more in there, Texas A&M. You look at just statistically for Texas A&M going up against South Carolina. Short number in terms of that. They've won 8 straight in the series. They've won the last 3 games in the series by an average margin of victory of 30 points per game. One more, you look at Jimbo Fisher straight up against SEC East opponents. Straight up, he is 7-1 overall over the last 4 years and 8-0 ATS against SEC East opponents. They won last year 44-14. I know both teams are similar, but Texas A&M has better talent. It's on the road. It's in Williams-Brice. I understand that South Carolina has won 3 straight. They're coming in a bye week, but I still don't believe in the passing game, whether it be Spencer Rattler, Luke Doty, if he's available. Still not sold on the consistency of the passing game of South Carolina. I'm buying into Texas A&M. I think they're able to run it just a little bit better on the front 7 of South Carolina, and I think they cover this 3.5-point number Saturday night in Williams-Brice. So there's the picks again. Pac-12, UCLA plus the 6, Washington minus the 7.5, Arizona State plus the 3. Big Ten, you have Iowa plus the 28.5, Minnesota plus the 4.5, SEC, LSU minus the 1.5, and Texas A&M minus the 3.5. I'll see you Saturday at 9 o'clock. Have a great week, everyone. Enjoy the games.